It's strange, isn't it? How life can feel so ordinary one moment and then, in an instant, change forever. 1 minute, you're sitting on your couch, discussing homework with your husband, and the next, everything goes black. That's how it happened for me on the evening of the 4th of August 2020. 1 minute, I was home, surrounded by the warmth of my family. The next, I was somewhere else entirely. Let me backtrack for a moment. For months before that evening, I had been battling with my health. Exhaustion, pain, dizziness, and an overwhelming sense of being drained physically and emotionally. I went from one doctor to another, and no one could pinpoint the problem. Tests were done, and diagnoses were tossed around like playing cards in a deck. But nothing ever seemed to stick. They couldn't find a cause. And I just kept sinking deeper, questioning what was wrong with me, wondering if I would ever feel whole again. Then came that night. I was sitting in the living room with my husband Jack as we discussed our kids and their schoolwork. It was a typical evening, the kind of mundane moment you don't expect to be the turning point of your life. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating, like it had a weight all its own. Without warning, everything around me dimmed, my vision blurred, my body felt as though it was slipping away from me. I remember Jack's voice calling my name, his concern seeping through the haze of darkness, but I couldn't respond. And then, everything went silent. I don't know how long I was in that state, but when I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in my living room anymore. The world I had known was gone. I wasn't in my body anymore. I didn't feel the weight of flesh or bone. I was weightless, suspended in a vast space, illuminated by a light so bright and pure it felt as though the air itself was made of radiance. The light wrapped around me, not blinding, but comforting, warm and welcoming. At first, I couldn't make sense of where I was. There was no floor beneath me, no walls or ceilings, just this endless stretch of light. My heart raced in my chest, but at the same time, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace, as if I had been transported to a place that was beyond time and space. And then, I saw him. He stood in front of me so pure, so beautiful, that words can hardly do justice to what I saw. His robe was dazzling white, glowing like nothing I had ever seen before. His eyes, deep and knowing, locked onto mine. It wasn't just a gaze, it was as though he was looking straight into my soul, seeing everything, every doubt, every fear, and every longing. "Rachel," he said, his voice soft yet powerful, "you are here for a reason." I was frozen. My thoughts scrambled for something to say, but before I could even form a question, he spoke again. "There is much you don't understand, but I will show you the truth." I didn't understand what he meant at that moment, but a strange calm washed over me. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a vast chasm, about to leap into something far greater than I could comprehend. There was fear, yes, but it wasn't a terror I had ever known. It was a different kind of fear, of awe, one of anticipation. I wasn't sure where this was going, but deep down, I knew it was something I had to experience. And then, he began to show me. The light around me grew even brighter, and I found myself standing in a place that felt both familiar and impossibly foreign. It was as though I was standing on the threshold of a deep spiritual understanding, one that was just out of reach, but I could feel its pull, its truth calling me. I looked at Jesus, standing before me, and I could sense he was about to reveal something monumental. "Rachel," he began, his voice still calm and reassuring, "there is something you have believed for far too long, something that has shaped the way you see the world, and I am here to show you the truth." I felt a flutter of anxiety in my chest. What could he possibly mean? Was there something in my beliefs that I hadn't yet understood? And then, he spoke the words that would forever change my life. "Let me tell you about the curse of Ham," he said, and I immediately felt a shift in the air. The very mention of it filled me with unease, for this was something I had grown up hearing, something that had been ingrained in me. The curse of Ham, the story that so many had used to justify racial prejudice, discrimination, and injustice throughout history. It was a story I had learned from a young age, one that shaped my worldview, just as it had for so many others. I had always been told that the curse, the mark of disgrace, fell upon Ham's descendants, that the African people were somehow cursed, doomed to live in a lower state because of the actions of one man so long ago. It was a narrative that had been twisted and distorted, passed down for generations. But Jesus was about to shatter everything I thought I knew. "The curse was never meant for Ham's descendants, Rachel," he said, looking at me with compassion. "It was never about race or skin color. It was about something much deeper, something spiritual." My mind raced as I tried to process what he was saying. How could this be? How could everything I had been taught for so long be wrong? He continued, "The curse was placed not on Ham, but on his son Canaan. It was a consequence of disobedience, of sin, not a judgment on an entire people or race. And yet, over time, that truth has been obscured, twisted by those who sought to justify their own prejudices." Jesus went on to explain the story from the Bible how Ham, seeing his father Noah in a drunken and shameful state, had failed to cover him out of respect, and how Noah, in his anger, placed a curse on Canaan, Ham's son. It was a personal punishment, a consequence for Canaan's actions, not a blanket curse on an entire lineage. Yet, somehow, this truth had been distorted through generations of misinterpretation. I stood there, struggling to wrap my mind around this revelation. The curse of Ham, the very thing that had been used to justify so much pain, wasn't a curse on an entire race. It was a misunderstanding, a misinterpretation of what was actually said in those ancient texts. "But why, Lord?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why has this lie endured for so long?" Jesus' eyes softened with understanding. "Because the truth is often the first casualty in a world filled with hatred and fear. People twist things to serve their own agendas, Rachel. They take what is sacred and use it to create division. But the time for that is over. It's time to heal." And in that moment, everything shifted. The heavy weight I had carried for so long, the weight of this misconception that had shaped so much of the history I had known, began to lift. It wasn't just a spiritual revelation, it was a freedom, a liberation from the chains of ignorance and hate that had bound so many. I stood there, still reeling from the truth I had just received. The curse of Ham, something I had believed for my entire life, had been nothing more than a twisted misconception. But Jesus wasn't finished with his revelations. There was more, so much more, that I needed to understand. With a gentle motion, he gestured for me to follow. And as we moved through that luminous space, I felt a new sense of purpose, a deep hunger for knowledge that I couldn't shake. Jesus' presence was calming, but there was an urgency in his voice, as if he was about to reveal something of immense importance. "Rachel," he began, his voice steady and full of conviction, "you have believed many things that were false about the African people, and it is time to correct that understanding. I will show you the truth of their legacy, the divine blessing behind their heritage." I felt a deep stirring in my soul. The African people, my people, what truth was he going to reveal? I had always wondered, deep down, what my true heritage was, beyond what I had been taught. The pain, the confusion, the historical distortion, all of it weighed on me. He continued, "The descendants of Ham, the African nations, were never cursed. They were chosen. There was a divine plan for the man that stretches back to the beginning of time. The blessings they carry have been misunderstood and misrepresented for centuries." As he spoke, images began to flash before my eyes. I saw the great civilizations of Kush, Mizraim, and Put-ancient African kingdoms that flourished long before the world truly knew their significance. I saw the kingdom of Kush, rich with culture and wisdom, existing side by side with Egypt, one of the great ancient civilizations of the world. Kush, Jesus explained, was the father of the African peoples, those who gave birth to the great kingdom of Kush. This kingdom, along with Egypt, stood as a beacon of strength, honor, and wisdom. I felt a sense of awe as the images of these civilizations grew clearer, their accomplishments vast and profound. The people of Kush, the Egyptians, had contributed so much to the world architecture, knowledge, spirituality yet. For so long, their history had been overshadowed by distortion and prejudice. Kush, he said, is where the name black originated not as a symbol of shame, but as a symbol of beauty, strength, and power. Blackness was never meant to be a curse. It was a sacred identity, a blessed identity. I stood, speechless, trying to absorb the weight of his words. For so long, I had been taught that being black was something less, something that carried a mark of shame or inferiority. But Jesus was showing me that it was a divine gift. Look, Rachel, he said, pointing to the images of ancient kings and queens, mighty leaders of Kush and Egypt. These people were blessed with wisdom, leadership, and divine favor. The nations of Ethiopia, Kush, Nubia, and Egypt were not cursed. They were chosen. I saw the faces of great African leaders, their eyes fierce with determination, their voices strong with purpose. These were the leaders who had been divinely chosen to lead, to teach, and to spread knowledge to the world. And as Jesus spoke, I realized something. The history I had learned, the history that had been passed down to me, was incomplete. The truth had been hidden for so long, buried beneath centuries of lies and misinterpretations. But now the veil was being lifted. I could see clearly now. The African people descendants of Ham had been chosen for a higher purpose. They had a legacy of greatness, of wisdom, of divine blessing. And in that moment, I knew that the truth had to be shared, that it was time for the world to know the true story of the African people. Their history was not one of disgrace, it was a history of honor, strength, and divine purpose. As the light around me seemed to shift and glow with even more brilliance, Jesus led me deeper into this divine space. I felt as if we were traveling through the very fabric of time, from one revelation to another, each one revealing a truth that had been hidden for so long. We stopped before a vast landscape, one that was familiar yet unlike anything I had ever seen. This wasn't a place of peace or beauty. It was Egypt, the land of mystery and ancient wisdom, but also the land of oppression and suffering. Egypt, Jesus spoke, and his voice was heavy with meaning, has been misunderstood for so long. It was not just a place of enslavement. It was a cradle of civilization, a place where knowledge and wisdom flourished. And its role in the Bible is far more than what history has told you. I was stunned. Growing up, Egypt had always been portrayed as a place of bondage, a symbol of the cruelty and suffering of the Israelites. The story of the Exodus was one of oppression and escape, with Egypt serving as the backdrop for one of the most harrowing chapters of biblical history. But here, in the presence of Jesus, that narrative was being rewritten before my eyes. Jesus, I don't understand, I whispered. How could Egypt be anything but a place of pain and suffering, especially for your people? He looked at me with deep compassion, as if he understood the weight of my question. Rachel, he said, Egypt was not always a place of enslavement. Long before the fall into idolatry and corruption, Egypt was chosen by God to be a source of wisdom, a beacon of knowledge that would be shared with the nations. I felt a sense of awe wash over me. The ancient Egyptians, with their towering pyramids and mysticism, had always fascinated me. But I had never considered the possibility that they were divinely chosen to carry a special purpose in God's plan. Could it be true? The Egyptians, Jesus continued, were descendants of Mizraim, one of Ham's sons. They were part of the same blessed lineage as Cush, and they were entrusted with great knowledge that was meant to guide the world. As he spoke, I saw glimpses of ancient Egypt magnificent temples, wise rulers, and scholars who sought to understand the mysteries of the universe. This wasn't the Egypt of slavery and oppression that I had learned about in Sunday school. No, this was a place of divine purpose, a civilization steeped in wisdom and spiritual insight. Even in their fall, Jesus explained, Egypt was never meant to be viewed solely as a place of bondage. It was a land of divine purpose. The wisdom they possessed was a gift from God, meant to enlighten the nations. But, he acknowledged, Egypt had fallen into idolatry. Their wisdom had been distorted, their knowledge tainted by the worship of false gods. Still, he reminded me, the foundation of their teachings had been rooted in truth. Egypt's role in history wasn't just one of oppression. It was a land that had carried the divine light, even if it had lost its way. "Don't forget, Rachel," he said gently. "Moses, the great prophet, was raised in Pharaoh's palace, not by accident. He was placed there by divine purpose, to draw from the wisdom of the Egyptians. It was through Egypt that I would later call my people out. But Egypt, in its early days, was meant to be a source of light." I stood in stunned silence, feeling the enormity of this revelation. Egypt, a place I had long associated with suffering and darkness, was now being revealed to me as a cradle of divine wisdom. It had been a beacon of spiritual and intellectual discovery, a light that had been hidden beneath centuries of distortion. As I stood there, absorbing the magnitude of everything Jesus had shown me, I felt a profound sense of peace settle within me. I had come so far farther than I ever thought possible. The layers of confusion, fear, and misunderstanding that had shaped my beliefs for so long were unraveling before my eyes, and in their place was clarity, truth, and light. Jesus turned to me, his eyes filled with compassion and understanding, as if he could see the transformation taking place within me. "Rachel," he said, his voice warm yet firm, "you are not just a witness to these truths. You are part of something much greater. The journey you've taken today is only the beginning. The truth I've revealed to you is not just for you, it's for the world." His words hit me like a tidal wave. How could I be a part of something so grand, so divine? I had always felt so small, so disconnected from something larger than myself. But now, everything was changing. I was being shown my true identity, not just as an individual, but as a part of something ancient, something sacred. Jesus spoke again, and his words were filled with power. "The African people, the descendants of Ham, are not cursed. They have been misunderstood, misrepresented, and oppressed for far too long. But I am here to restore their true legacy." In that moment, I understood. The Black community, my community, was not a group defined by suffering and degradation. No, we were warriors, survivors of centuries of pain, yes, but also bearers of a divine legacion of strength, wisdom, and resilience. We had been called to a higher purpose, and it was time for the world to see it. Jesus continued, his voice a mixture of sadness and hope. "The struggles that Black people have endured through slavery, colonization, discrimination have not been in vain. They have been a part of a larger spiritual battle, a battle for truth, for justice, for the restoration of dignity. The world may have tried to suppress the beauty and power of Black heritage, but it will no longer succeed." I saw visions in that moment, visions of the past, present, and future. I saw the faces of my ancestors, strong and proud, enduring hardship but never losing their faith, their spirit. I saw the faces of those who fought for justice, leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and countless others who had been inspired by this divine spark within them. They were not just fighting for civil rights. They were fighting for the soul of humanity itself. And then, Jesus showed me something even more powerful. "The time for healing has come," he said, his voice filled with assurance. "The time for restoration is now. The truth about the Black community will be revealed to the world, and with it will come a new era of understanding, unity, and peace." I could feel the weight of those words deep in my soul. This wasn't just a personal revelation, it was a call to action, a mandate for change. The future of the Black community was not one of continued oppression or suffering. It was a future of empowerment, of recognition, of healing, and it was up to us to carry this message forward. As I returned to my earthly body, I felt a surge of energy within me, a sense of purpose I had never known before. I had seen the truth. I had experienced the divine plan that had been hidden for so long, and now I was ready to share it with the world.